Good morning to all. So, today our topic is the importance of immunology in transplantation. The field of transplantation has revolutionized the field of organ failures. Now, for any organ failure, we have an option of transplantation. That is taking from skin grafting to the transplantation of any vessels or any nerves, or transplantation of even small intestine, pancreas, islet of kidney. So, like that, any organ failure, we have an option of transplantation. So, how is it possible to transplant an organ? So, we know that whenever a foreign pathogen is entered into our body, our immune system will immediately will become activated and will try to expel that foreign pathogen. Like that, in case of a transplant, also, whenever a foreign transplant is taken into our body will try to expel that foreign body. So, in order to happen, a successful transplantation to occur, there should be some immunosuppression should take place in our body in order to prevent that rejection. So that is why the importance of immunology in transplantation. So before going to this aspect of transplantation, we will see how our immune system is working in our body a little bit. Okay. So whenever a foreign pathogen like a bacteria or virus is entering into our body, so it will be detected by or infected by many of the cells in our body. So we will divide these cells into two. So one is any nucleated cell that is occurring in our body, any nucleated cell. So second one is an antigen presenting cells. Antigen presenting cells like macrophages, dendritic cells, and B lymphocytes. So how is this? How these cells will respond to the presence of a foreign antigen that we will see? So first we will see the antigen presenting cells. So whenever a foreign body is taken or present inside the body, the antigen presenting cells will detect that antigen and it will engulf the foreign pathogen or antigen. And this antigen is break down into multiple protein particles, protein peptides by an enzyme called proteasome inside the cytoplasm. Once this is break down into multiple different pieces, it can activate and assemble major histocompatibility complexes within the antigen presenting cells. The antigen presenting cells has got two different types of major histocompatibility complex. Major histocompatibility complex type 1 and major histocompatibility complex type 2. So these are in order to identify or detect. It can react only with an antigen. It cannot detect a foreign antigen. It cannot detect a self antigen. So they know how to differentiate between self antigen and a foreign antigen. So once this major histocompatibility complex is activated, it has got a group to bind to this small protein peptide antigens. So this major histocompatibility complex bind with this small peptide antigens and it will travel from the cytoplasm to the cell surface. So finally what will happen, the major histocompatibility complex will be present on the cell surface of antigen presenting cells with a protein peptide over its surface. So antigen presenting cells has got two types of major histocompatibility complex, type 1 and type 2. Okay. So the next cell is a nucleated cell in our body. Any nucleated cell has got only limitation, only major histocompatibility complex type 1. Okay. Then similarly as in case of antigen presenting cells, once the pathogen enters into the cytoplasm of the nucleated cell, it will break down into different pieces and it activates and assembles the major histocompatibility complex type 1 inside the cell. And it has got a group to bind to this small protein antigens, and once it is binding to this protein antigen it will be taken into the cell surface. Okay, so now the antigen presenting cells and the nucleated cells are activated. Now what is the next step? So this antigen presenting cells with major histocompatibility type 2 can activate a T lymphocyte. How is it activating a T lymphocyte? For which it has to, the major histocompatibility complex has to bind to the T cell, T lymphocyte. How is this binding happening? So the antigen presenting cells with major histocompatibility complex over its surface binds to the T cell with the help of a T cell receptor. So simple binding of this MHC with the T cell receptor is not sufficient to activate this T lymphocyte. For that, another co-stimulatory mechanisms are also taking place. What are these co-stimulatory mechanisms? For the co-stimulatory mechanisms, there are two other molecules present in the T cell and the antigen presenting cells. So, the ligand present in the major histocombatibility, ligand present in the antigen presenting cell for the co-stimulatory molecule is CD80 and CD86, and the co-stimulatory receptor for the uh, co-stimulatory activation is CD28, which is present in the T lymphocyte. So, once the major histocompatibility complex binds with the T cell receptor, another co-stimulatory activation is taking place by binding of CD80 and 86 with CD28. Then only the complete activation of the T lymphocyte will take place. So, once it is becoming activated, the activation again is depending upon the interleukins released upon the macrophage also. Macrophage, that means antigen presenting cells. So, this co-stimulatory molecule, T cell receptor activation, and the interleukins 1 from the major histocompatibility complex will activate the T lymphocytes. Once the T cell lymphocytes is activated, it started to produce its cytokines or interleukins, like interleukin 2, mainly interleukin 2. The interleukin 2 will activate and proliferate many of the T lymphocytes. So it can generate many T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. Okay, so the effector cells are produced by the activated T lymphocytes. The effector cells are CD8 T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. First we will see CD8 T lymphocytes. Okay, so CD8 T lymphocytes can attach to any cells infected by the pathogen with the help of a major histocompatibility complex. Type 1. So CD8 cytotoxic T lymphocyte bind with major histocompatibility complex type 1. Okay, then it can directly induce damage of the infected cell. Then in B lymphocyte, I already said there's T lymphocytes can activate cytotoxic T lymphocytes as well as B lymphocytes. Then these B lymphocytes can turn into two. One is a memory cell. This is for the immunity, for the attack of further attack by the same antigen. Then another is the plasma cell. This plasma cell will produce so many antibodies. These antibodies can bind to, again this antibody can direct the antibody mediated killing. This is by several mechanisms. One of that is activation of the complement system. Another is by it can bind to the antigen, the antibody can bind to the antigen, and it promotes the activity of the antigen presenting cells. So the cell killing mechanism can be aggravated. Okay, now we'll go and see what I have explained. We can see in a video. Okay, so this is an antigen presenting cell. This is an antigen presenting cell. So it has a nucleus. This is an endoplasmic reticulum and the Golgi apparatus is there. So we will see what is happening when an antigen is entering into our body. So many antigens are entering in the body. Pathogen is entering into our body. So one of the pathogen is entered by the macrophage. It is break down into different pieces. Okay. Now you can see, as I already said, it assembled and activated the major histocompatibility complex, and the major histocompatibility complex has got a binding part for this protein. Okay, so from inside the cytoplasm, it is taken into the surface of the antigen presenting cells. Okay. So the antigen is presented to the surface by the antigen presenting cell. Okay, now we will see what is happening. Okay, sorry. Okay, so you will see one second. Okay, so this is antigen is presented to the cell surface by these molecules. Okay, now it is binding to the T cell. So antigen presenting cells has got MHC type 2 and type 1. So this is binding to a MHC T helper cell. So in order to bind to a CD4 T helper cell, it should be MHC class 2. MHC class 1 can bind only to cytotoxic T lymphocytes. So this binding is not enough for the activation of T helper cells. I already said there should be some co-stimulatory molecules like CD80 and 86 and bind to the CD28 on the T cell surface. Okay, so once this binding has happened, the macrophages will secrete interleukin 1. It will activate the T lymphocyte. Okay, I'm sorry for this delay. Okay, so we can see this interleukin 1 is released and it will activate the T lymphocytes. So once activated, it will start to release interleukin 2 and causes the proliferation of or the differentiation of cytotoxic T lymphocytes and B lymphocytes. Okay, the cytotoxic CD8 T lymphocyte has got will bind only to the MHC type 1. Okay, that we will see how it is acting. So, any normal cell can also engulf the pathogen and break down to different pieces. On nucleated cell has got only MHC type 1 over its surface. So, MHC type 1 with the antigen will bind to CD8 cytotoxic T cell. So, we will see how it is binding to the cytotoxic T lymphocytes. Okay, now it is binding to the cytotoxic T lymphocytes. So it is by the cytotoxic T lymphocyte by several mechanisms will disintegrate and destroy the infected cell. Okay, now we will see the second part. So I said the second activated cell is the B cells. So these B cells binds with the T lymphocyte. Okay, see. So many plasma cells are being produced. And it will form an antibodies. And these antibodies will help in antibody mediated killing of the infected pathogen. Like one example is the complement system activation. So another is it will help or aid in macrophage mediated killing. Okay, I hope you understand. So one second cell part is memory B cells. It is for the further future. If any future attack by this similar pathogen occurs, we can they immediately antibodies are produced and cell killing can take place. That is importance of memory cells. Okay, we will see in now we will see another mechanism. So I already said that the activation of the T lymphocyte is taking place by binding with the antigen presenting cell. So binding of the CD4 activation of CD4 lymphocyte is taking place by binding with macrophages. Okay, so I said simple binding is not enough for the activation of the T lymphocytes. For the activation to take place, there should be some co-stimulatory molecules also. This co-stimulatory effect is coming from CD80 and CD86 on macrophage and which is binding to the CD28 on T lymphocytes. Okay, so there is an additional molecule present in the T lymphocytes, that is CTLA4. This CTLA4 competitively inhibits CD28. That is the CTLA4 present on the T lymphocyte is competitively inhibiting CD28. That is the CTLA4 will bind with the CD80 and CD86. Therefore, what will happen? The co-stimulatory molecules are not activated. So T lymphocyte is not activated. So what will happen? There will not be any cytotoxic T lymphocyte activated or B lymphocytes are produced. So immunity will not take place. Okay, that is the importance of CTLA molecule. So we will see how it is done. Activated cell. So okay, then this is the antigen presenting cell with the MHC, measures compatibility complex and binding with the T cell receptor. And this yellow part is the antigen, and this red is the T cell receptor MHC. And I said this is not enough for the activation of T cell receptor, but it should also have co-stimulatory molecules as CD80, CD86 and T cell CD28 on the T cell. Okay, so how we will see how the CTLA4 is interacting with this molecule. So this is the co-stimulatory molecule. I'm sorry. Okay, so this is the co-stimulatory molecule CD80 and CD86 on the antigen presenting cells and CD28 on the active T cell. Okay, okay, so T cell is being activated. Now comes the CTLA4 molecule on the T cell. Okay, so this CTLA4 is moving away this CD28 and it is binding with the CD80 and CD86. So this activating pathway is interrupted. So this you can see the activating pathway is interrupted. So what will happen is inactive. It will become inactive. The T cell become inactive. So if it is the CD80 and CD86 is binding to CTLA4, the T cell will not become activated. So in order to activate the cell, T cell has to bind with CD28 molecules on the T cell. So if it is not binding, it is binding to the CTLA4, the T cell is not activated and immunity is not developed against the pathogen. I'm telling this on the basis of the malignancy. The same pathology is taking place in any foreign body also. That is, I'm telling on the basis of the tumor. That's all. You don't have to look into all these things. Just listen or carefully what I am telling. Okay. Now this is a CTLA4 inhibiting molecule. CTLA4 inhibiting molecule. So we are giving a molecule to inhibit the CTLA4. So it will not. So when we inhibit the CTLA4, it will not bind to the CD80 and CD86. Instead, it can bind with CD28 and activate the T cell. So inhibition of CTLA4 helps to activate the immune system. Okay, so it will activate the T cell and can produce affected cells like that. So that is the importance of CTLA4 inhibition. Okay, so once activated, you can see what is happening to this tumor cell. So it is activated, the T cell is activated, and the immunity will destroy the tumor cells. This is the tumor cells. This is the tumor environment, and this activated T cells are causing immune destruction. Okay. Okay. We will see what is in the next slide. Okay. This is the same thing. CTLA4. How CTLA4 is preventing. Okay. So I'm not going again into this same thing. Okay. This is antigen presenting cell CD80, 86, CD28. So only if this is happen, this T cell become activated. Okay. Only if this is happening, CD will activate. Then activated T cells will form. Okay, so CTLA may prevent activation and proliferation of T cell by competing with CD28. So CTLA for present in the T cell will bind with CD80 and 86 and inactivation of T cell will happen. Okay. So we will see how transplant rejection is happening in our body. So we will see this kidney is been damaged. Okay, so we are placing a good transplant over here. So our T cell, I already said our T cell will attack this foreign pathogen. Our T cell will attack with foreign pathogen and by binding with the dendritic cell. Dendritic cells are antigen presenting cells which will bind with the T cell and it will activate the T cells. Okay. These T cells will, once activated, what will happen? It will give rise to many effector cells and antibodies. Many effector cells and antibodies. Okay. This is the same thing that I have been taught. Okay. So this is the basics of immunity, basics regarding immunology. Now we'll see all these things in little detail. Okay. So we'll first see what are the different types of graft. So if the graft is taken from the same individual, it is known as autograft. If it is taken from an identical twin, it is a syngenetic graft. So if it is taken from a non-identical individual, it is an allograft. If it is taken from a different species, it is a xenograft. So other than all graft other than autograft will generate foreign antigen and it will leads to graft rejection. So in order to prevent this graft rejection, immunosuppressive therapy is very important. So we will see the importance of immunity or immune reaction in a transplantation is graft rejection. So we will first see what is a graft rejection. So all the immune reactions, everything has been we already saw in the video. So it is the same thing that we are repeating already. Okay. So I already said the graft taken from the different species are usually provoke a powerful immune response that results in rapid graft rejection unless an immunosuppressive therapy is given. So allograft rejection is mainly due to an immune response and it is not due to a non-specific inflammatory response. We already see the immune response is the major cause for this allograft rejection. And we now know that the T lymphocytes, mainly CD4 T helper T lymphocytes, play an essential role in mediating rejection. The allograft trigger a graft rejection response because of allelic differences at polymorphic genes that give rise to histocompatibility antigens or transplant antigens. Because I already said the specific cause for this rejection is presence of the histocompatibility antigens that is present on the transplant. So our body can identify what is the native histocompatibility antigen and what is the foreign histocompatibility antigen. So what are the different two different types of histocompatibility antigens? So one is a ABO red group antigens and human leukocyte antigens. These two are the important histocompatibility antigens. Okay, so we will first see this leukocyte antigens. Okay, so first important one is ABO blood group antigens. We know that when there is an incompatible blood transfusion occurs, so we know that there can be immediate transfusion-based reactions can occur. So you might think that the ABO blood group antigens are present only of the red blood cell. It is not true. It can present in most of other cell types also. It usually, if there is an ABO incompatible transplantation take place, it can result in a hyperacute graft rejection. We will see what is a hyperacute graft rejection in the following slide. So we know that the blood group A contains antigen A and antibody B, and blood group B contains antigen B and antibody A. So and blood group AB contains A and B antigens, and blood group O contains no antigens, but it contains both the antibodies. Now we will see if it is blood group A is transferring to or transplanting to blood group A itself, there will not be any reaction. Now we will see if you transplant blood group A is incompatible and it is transplanted to a blood group B. So the donor has got antigen A and the recipient has got antibody A. So what will happen? This antigen A and antibody A will react and it can result in incompatibility and reactions and can result in transplant rejection. That is the basis of ABO related transplant rejection. It usually results in hyperacute graft rejection. So the permissible transplants are usually from group 1 O donor to blood group O, A, B or AB recipient, because blood group A O does not has got an antigen, zero antigen, so it can transfer to any group. And blood group A donor to group A or AB recipient, and group B donor to group B or AB recipient, and group AB donor to group AB recipient. And there is no need to take account of rhesus antigen compatibility in organ transplantation. Now the second antigen is human leukocyte antigen. So allograft rejection in that is in blood group compatible graft. So we have made this ABO incompatibility. We have tested the ABO incompatibility. There is no incompatibility, and the blood group is compatible. Then the rejection is mainly directed against the human leukocyte antigen. It is a group of highly polymorphic cell surface molecules, and HLAs are the strong transplant antigens by virtue of their special physiological role as antigen recognizing units for display of antigen from foreign pathogens for recognition by T lymphocytes. We already So the role of human leukocyte antigen or major histocompatibility complex in detection by the T lymphocytes. Okay. So this is the structure of. There are two types of HLA class 1 and HLA class 2. HLA class 1 molecule is present in all the nucleated cells, and HLA class 2 is present only in specialized cells like antigen presenting cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, and B lymphocytes. The structure you can see, as you can see, it is made up of class 1 is made up of 2 alpha chains, 1 beta alpha 3 chains, and 1 beta 2 microglobulin. And class 2 is made up of 2 alpha chains and 2 beta chains. Now you know that I already said there is antigen is taken into our body, it is break down to different peptides. So one of these antigen peptides is binding onto the subunit alpha 2 alpha 1. There is a groove here to bind to the peptide antigen. So it is binding here. Likely, similarly in HLA class 2 also it is there is a groove for binding of this peptide, foreign peptide antigen. And this once it is binding, once this is activated, assembled and bind to this peptide, it will be taken onto the cell surface, and it will bind to the T cells and activate that T cell. So there are two types of HLA molecules, HLA class 1 and class 2. They are broadly similar in structure but have different cell expression profiles. Class 1 antigens are present on all nucleated cells, and class 2 antigens have a more restricted distribution and are expressed more strongly on antigen presenting cells such as dendritic cells, macrophages, and B lymphocytes. So we'll see, we just saw what are the antigens that are provoking the immune response. Now how these antigens are presented over to these T lymphocytes, that is by specialized cells known as antigen presenting cells. So antigen presenting cells are a cell that displays peptide fragments of protein antigens in association with MHC molecules on its surface, and it activates antigen specific T cells. So antigen presenting cells has got is, once the antigen is engulfed by this antigen presenting cells, it will break down to different peptide particles, and it will activate the MHC molecules, and these MHC molecules will bind with this peptide, and then this MHC molecule will come onto the surface of the antigen presenting cells. So that is what is written in the first paragraph. That is a cell that displays peptide fragments of protein antigens in association with MHC molecules on its surface and activates a specific T cell. In addition to displaying this peptide MHC complexes, APC must also express co-stimulatory molecules to optimally activate T lymphocytes. I said that the binding of MHC, simple binding of MHC to T lymphocyte will not activate the T cells, but it should also have some co-stimulatory molecules like CD80, CD86. Okay, so we'll see what are different antigen presenting cells. So these are macrophages, B cells, and dendritic cells. So dendritic cells are bone marrow derived cells which are found in the epithelia, and most organs initiate immune response by presenting foreign antigens to T cells. Macrophages are a tissue based phagocytic cell derived from blood monocytes, and we all know what is B lymphocytes. So these are the antigen presenting cells. So T cells recognize HLA molecules via their T cell receptor. T cell activation also requires the delivery of an additional or second signal by the interaction of co-stimulatory molecules on the surface of the antigen presenting cell and T cell. Everything is, I have covered all these things. So this is the binding of the major histocompatibility complex with the T cell. So just a minute. So here this is the T cell, CD4 T helper cell, and this is the antigen presenting cell. So binding of MHC with the T cell receptor is by MHC molecule, T cell receptor, and CD3 is a complex. T cell receptor and CD3 forms a complex to bind with the MHC peptide. This binding is not enough to activation, but it should have a co-stimulatory molecule also for the activation. These co-stimulatory molecules are CD80, CD86, CD40, which is present on the antigen presenting cells, and CD28 and CD154 when 54 present in the T cells. Once this complex, whole complex is formed, the T cell become activated and it will start secreting interleukin 2. Interleukin 2. Okay. So this is the activation of T lymphocytes. So again the same picture only. This is CD28 on the T cell, and this is the major histocompatibility complex. This is same thing only. Okay. So what is happening here? Let's see. I am also looking. So this is the activated antigen presenting cells. So it is binding with the CD28 and there is interleukin 12, which is the activating interleukin 1 and interleukin 12 are usually activate the T cells. Once it is activated, this activated T lymphocyte will produce interleukin 2 and it will further proliferation of the affected T cells like cytotoxic T lymphocytes. Okay. So SLA expressed by graft cell activate T cells and stimulate them to proliferate in response to interleukin 2 and other T cell growth factor. Activated CD4 T cells through the release of cytokines play a central role in orchestrating the various effector mechanisms responsible for graft rejection. We will see what are these effector cells. We already saw what are the effector cells. We'll once again go through all these things. The cellular effectors of graft rejection include cytotoxic CD8 T cells, which recognize the donor HLA class 1 antigens expressed by the graft and cause target cell through the release of lytic molecules such as perforin and granzymes. Okay, then graft infiltrating CD4 T cells, which recognize donor class 2 antigens, mediate direct target cell damage. And it is also by the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines such as interferon gamma to recruit and activate macrophages that act as non-specific effector cells. CD4 T cells provide an essential T cell hub for B lymphocytes, which differentiate into plasma cells and produce allo antibodies that bind to graft antigen and induce target cell injury directly or through antibody-dependent cell-mediated cytotoxicity. So everything has been covered. So CD4 activates CD8 cells. CD8 causes damage of the cell death by the help of perforins and granzymes. The perforins will form so many pores over the target cells, and through which this pores, granzyme will enter into the cell, and these granzymes will activate so many proteases and caspases, and these proteases and caspases will cause the lysis of the target cell. Then CD4 T cells again can activate, release so many interleukins and pro-inflammatory mediators like interferon gamma, interleukin 2 and all. So interferon gamma, it will activate the macrophages and it will act as a non-specific effector cell. Then again CD4 T lymphocyte activate the B lymphocyte, which will turn into plasma cell and produce antibodies and antibody mediated killing, cytotoxicity. That is another pathway. So again the same things only. CD4 CD8 T lymphocyte, which is suppressor of cytotoxic T cells, so called because they kill cells harboring intracellular microbes or foreign cells such as seen in a transplant. So activated peptides bound to self HLA class 1 molecule. So activated cells cause tissue injury by releasing membrane damaging proteins from intracellular granules such as perforin and granzymes, and recruitment of other affected cells to the cell. So this perforin, which is released from the T cell granule, undergoes polymerization in the lipid bilayer of the target cell plasma membrane and forms a large aqueous pore, which is used for the entry of other T cell enzymes. So this perforin will form a large aqueous pore over this target cell, and through which this pore other T cell enzymes are entering into the target cell. So granzyme is a serine protease enzyme in the T cell granules, which enters the target cell through this perforin pore and proteolytically cleaves and activates caspases, which in turn cleaves several substrates and induce target cell apoptosis. Okay. So I'm not going again into all these things. This is the same thing. You can refer over to these slides how these effector mechanisms are causing damage or killing of the antigens. In this case, the transplant, how it is causing the destruction of the transplant. So everything is given. All the affected cells are given in this picture. You can refer to this picture for the same. Again, this is the same thing. How the cytotoxic lymphocytes are causing damage. So clearly you can see this is the perforin which forms a pore over the target cell and through which the granzyme is entering, and it cleaves and activates so many caspases, and these caspases cause the killing of the target cell. Killing of the target cell. Okay, so we'll continue. So this is again the same pathway. I'm not going to bore you again. So this is the same pathway. You can refer to this picture once more. Okay. Again the same, how it is killing the target cell. Okay, this see. So this will activate the METC will activate the CD4 cells. So it will through the natural killer cells, then cytotoxic T cells, then by release of the interferon gamma and interleukin 4, then interferon gamma, which will activate the macrophages and causes cell death, and then again activation of the B cells, and B cells will produce plasma cells and will produce antibody, which will result in antibody mediated killing. Okay, same thing, how this antibody mediated killing is happening. So antibody mediated killing can by means of activation of the complement and antibody mediated cell mediated cytotoxicity, that is neutrophil, macrophages and natural killer cell. So we'll see what are the types of allograft rejection. So allograft rejection can be divided into three distinct types. One is hyperacute rejection, that we already saw in that ABO incompatibility. In ABO incompatibility, hyperacute rejection is happening. So the rejection that is occurring immediately after transplantation is known as hyperacute rejection. Then acute rejection, which is usually occurs in the first 6 months, and chronic rejection that occurs months and years after transplantation. So what is hyperacute rejection? This is due to the presence in the recipient of preformed antibodies directed against class 1 antigens expressed by the donor. So hyperacute rejection is mainly directed against HLA class 1 antigen expressed by the donor. These antibodies may arise from the previous blood transfusion or a failed transplant or by pregnancy. So this type of rejection occurs if an ABO blood group is incompatible with the donor. So ABO incompatibility is the major cause for this hyperacute rejection. So what is happening in a hyperacute rejection? So after the revascularization of the graft, these antibodies bind immediately to the vasculature and activate the complement system and cause extensive intravascular thrombosis, interstitial hemorrhage and graft destruction within minutes and hours. So kidney transplants are particularly vulnerable to hyperacute graft rejection, whereas heart and liver transplant are relatively persistent. So this is the hyperacute rejection. So it is due to the preformed antibodies directed against class 1 HLA molecules present on the donor. So this allo antigen blood group antigen, it is binding to the allo antigen specific antibody. So allo antigen specific antibody will bind to this group class 1 antigen, and it will activate the complement system, endothelial damage, and it result in inflammation and thrombosis. Okay, so this is how hyperacute rejection is happening, because it is mainly due to antibodies. Antibody will bind to this allo antigen from blood group antigen, and it will activate complement system, causes the endothelial damage, inflammation, and causes thrombosis. Okay, this is the same thing. The antibody bind to class 1 antigen, and it causes microhemorrhagic thrombosis and activation of complement, and finally destruction of the graft. Hyperacute rejection can be avoided by ensuring ABO blood group compatibility. So we know that it is mainly because of the ABO incompatibility. So by making sure that the only compatible blood groups is transferred, we can prevent this hyperacute rejection. So cross-match test on recipient serum to ensure that there are no clinically relevant antibodies directed against HLA expressed by a prospective kidney donor. So proper cross-match test is enough to prevent a hyperacute rejection. Now we will see acute rejection. This usually occurs during the first 6 months after transplantation, but it can occur later also. It is mediated predominantly by T lymphocytes, but allo antibodies may also play an important role. Acute rejection is characterized by mononuclear cell infiltration of the graft. So in a hyperacute rejection, it is mainly by antibodies. Now here it is mainly by T lymphocytes, but antibodies can also cause the rejection. This mononuclear cell is heterogeneous and includes cytotoxic T cells, B cells, natural killer cells, and activated macrophages. Everything we have seen. So we know how cytotoxic T cell will cause cell killing, how B lymphocyte will mediate cell killing, how natural killer cells and activated macrophages mediated cell killing. So I already said antibody mediated damage may also present as evidenced by the deposition of the complement component C4D within the graft microskeleton. So one of the mechanism by this antibody results in the cytotoxicity is by activation of the complement. So when examining this the part of the or the component of the complement C4D is present in the graft microvasculature. That's the reason that we suspect there is an antibody mediated response also present in acute rejection. So all types of organ allograft are susceptible to acute rejection, which is typically occurring in around 20 to 30% of the graft. Most episodes of the acute cellular rejection can be reversed by additional immunosuppressive therapy. So we know that the main cause for this acute rejection is mainly by the activation of T lymphocytes. So this we can avoid by or reverse by additional immunosuppressive therapy. Acute antibody mediated rejection is more difficult to treat effectively and may require plasmapheresis or immunoadsorption. So antibody mediated rejection is very difficult to treat. The T cell mediated rejection we can treat by or reverse by additional immunosuppressive therapy. In case of antibody mediated rejection, it is very difficult to treat and require plasmapheresis or immunoadsorption. So this is the same thing how it is been rejected. We have described everything. Just go through these slides once more. Okay. So now we will see what is a chronic rejection. So this usually occurs after first 6 months. All types of transplants are susceptible to chronic rejection, and it is a major cause of allograft failure. Liver is more resistant than other organs to the destructive effects of chronic rejection. The pathophysiology of chronic rejection is not well understood, although the underlying mechanisms are immunological, and allobodies also are thought to be a major cause, and cellular effector mechanism may also contribute. So everything we have learned is the exact mechanism it is not identified, but underlying mechanisms are like antibody mediated can cause maybe antibody mediated or by the cellular effector mechanism. Then alloantigen independent factors also contribute in chronic rejection. So what are the risk factors for chronic rejection? So one is previous episodes of acute rejection, then poor HLA matching, then long cold ischemia time, then cytomegalovirus infection, raised blood lipids, and inadequate immunosuppression. The histological picture of a chronic rejection after organ transplantation is dominated mainly by the vascular changes. There will be myointimal proliferation in the arteries, which results in ischemia and fibrosis. So mainly there is myointimal proliferation, and which will result in ischemia, fibrosis, and damage of the cells. So what are the organ specific features of chronic graft rejection? So in the kidneys we can see glomerular sclerosis and tubular atrophy, and in the pancreas you can see acinar loss and islet cell destruction. In the heart you can see accelerated coronary artery disease and cardiac, which is a cardiac allograft vasculopathy. The liver you can see vanishing bile syndrome, and lungs you can see obliterative bronchiolitis, which will lead to functional deterioration of the graft resulting after months or years in a complete graft failure. Immunosuppressive therapy has got a little effect in preventing chronic rejection. We know that the ideal mechanism behind this chronic rejection is still not understood. The possible mechanisms are T cell mediated and antibody mediated. So since the exact mechanism, we don't know exact mechanism, the immunosuppressive therapy has got a little effect in preventing chronic rejection. So in acute rejection, the acute rejection is the only graft rejection that we can prevent it by using an additional immunosuppressive therapy. So now we'll see one topic known as graft versus host disease. Although the main immunological problem after transplantation is the graft rejection, the reciprocal problem of graft versus host reaction is occasionally seen after certain types of organ transplantation. Some donor organs, particularly liver and small bowel, contains large number of lymphocytes, and these may react against HLA expressed by recipient tissues, leading to graft versus host disease. So till now we are seeing about how the host immunity is reacting against the recipient immunity is reacting against the host antigen. So what will happen if the host, the donor has got some lymphocytes, and it can induce an immune reaction against the recipient antigens. That is the graft versus host reaction. Graft versus host reaction frequently involves the skin, which is causing a characteristic rash on the palms and soles. It may also involve the liver and the gastrointestinal tract after liver transplantation. Graft versus host reaction is a serious and sometimes fatal complication of transplantation. Now we'll see how we can prevent an rejection. So we know that the main main antigens for this rejection is an human leukocyte antigen present on the donor and the ABO antigens. So HLA molecules are encoded by the major histocompatibility complex, which is a cluster of genes situated on the short arm of chromosome 6. So individual can express between 6 to 12 different HLA antigens depending on the degree of homozygosity. So attempts are usually made to match the donor and recipient for as many as relevant HLAs as possible. So, and HLA A, B and DR are the most important antigens to take into account when matching donor and recipient in an attempt to reduce the risk of graft rejection. So we'll see what is this match. When a match, this is a picture of a matching where matching is done. HLA A, B, DR. A 0, 0, 0 mismatch is a full house or complete match. So it is a 0, 0. The result came out as 0, 0, 0 is a complete match. But whereas a 0, 1, 2 mismatch is matched at HLA. So 0 means it is matched. 1 means it has one mismatched HLA antigen. And if it is 2 written here, it is mismatched for both DR antigens. Okay, so 0, 1, 2 means it is in order. First is A, B and third is a DR. 0, 1, 2 mismatch means HLA1 is HLA A is matched, HLA B antigen is mismatched at 1, and at the DR antigen both antigens are mismatched. Now we will see. This is the father and mother. From father and mother, where the HLA different HLA is transferred to the next generation. Okay, so then when we are matching, you can see that the starred one. So the brother and you, the written U here and the brother are matched HLA matched genes. Okay, so 1810 1810% of the brother and 2711 271. So this is the correct matching of HLA. This is correct matching of HLA. So this can be the transplantation, safe transplantation can take from the person to you to brother. Okay, these are the identical match. So the tissue typing laboratory. So how they are matching this HLA and ABO incompatibility is based on the tissue typing laboratory. The tissue typing laboratory carries out 3 key tasks. First, they determine the HLA type of all potential organ transplant recipients and organ donors. This is achieved by applying polymerase chain reaction based DNA typing techniques to samples of peripheral blood. Second, they perform a cross match test to exclude the presence in a recipient of clinically significant circulating antibodies to HLAs expressed by the potential organ donor that would result in rapid or hyperacute rejection. So they will try to find out the presence of antibodies. So antibodies that is acting against the organ donor organ. Then this involves the incubating recipient sera with donor lymphocytes prepared from either blood or lymphoid tissue. The presence of anti-donor antibodies is detected in a conventional cytotoxic cross-match assay by adding rabbit complement along with indicator dyes and visualizing target cell death. Third, the tissue typing laboratory determines the HLA specificity of circulating anti-HLA antibodies in the recipients before and after organ transplantation to guide organ allocation in a allocation for an immunosuppressive therapy. So these are the things that is taking place in a tissue typing laboratory. So we now learned about the immunity or the how this rejection is, what are the different types of rejection, hyperacute, acute and chronic rejection, and how this immunity is acting in all this rejection. Now you will see, we know that in 3 types of rejection only the acute rejection can be prevented by providing an immunosuppressive therapy. All the graphs in all the graphs we have to give immunosuppressive therapy, but the acute rejection can be in case of an acute rejection we can prevent it by providing an additional immunosuppressive therapy. So we will see what are the immunosuppressive therapies available now. So one is a calcineurin inhibitor. So calcineurin inhibitors are cyclosporin and tacrolimus. These are the 2 mainstays of the treatment. Mainstay of immunosuppressive therapy is the calcineurin inhibitor. Each of the 2 agents binds with the T cell to a cytoplasmic protein or immunophilin. The cyclosporin binds with the cyclophilin and the tacrolimus binds with the FK binding protein. And this forms a immunophilin drug complex which then blocks the activity of calcineurin. So the calcineurin inhibitor, the main aim of action is to block the activity of calcineurin. For that they have to form a drug complex by binding with the immunophilin. So immunophilin binding with the cyclosporin is the cyclophilin, and immunophilin binds with the FK binding protein, means tacrolimus is the FK binding protein. So we will see how this is acting. So this is the antigen. Wait. So this is the antigen present cell. Antigen means the foreign antigen, either maybe leukocyte antigen or avian compatibility antigen, that is binding to the T cell. So once it is binded to the T cell, this how is this? So the T cell become activated. We already discussed the T cell become activated, and this T cell will produce interleukin 2. So main cause for this effectiveness of the T cell is due to the production of interleukin 2. For this production of interleukin 2, the main important molecule is helping is calcineurin. So interleukin 2 is produced from the nucleus. So we will see how it is this calcineurin is helping in formation of interleukin 2. That is shown in this video. Okay. So when this binding is occurring, calcium is released and it will activate the calcineurin. It will activate the calcineurin. Okay. This calcineurin will help to transcription and translation of interleukin 2. So production of interleukin 2. So we will see how interleukin 2 is produced. Okay. This is step. We will see what is happening next. So this is the interleukin 2 gene. Interleukin 2 gene. Interleukin 2 gene. So interleukins are produced. Okay. So this is the interleukin 2 molecule. Interleukin 2 molecule is released to the outside. Okay. Interleukin 2 is released. So interleukin 2 is released. Once again. Okay, so calcineurin plays a critical role in facilitating the transcription of interleukin 2, the main T cell growth factor, and other cytokines after T cell activation. So, so calcineurin is important in production of the interleukin 2. So by inhibiting the calcineurin, we can prevent the formation of interleukin 2 and thereby prevent the activation of immune system. That is what we seen by calcineurin inhibitors, right? Cyclosporin and tacrolimus. Okay, so same thing. We'll explain once more. So this is the MHC with T cell receptor. Then once it is binding, it is like phospholipase C activation causes release of the calcium. Calcium binds with the calcineurin, and it will act. Calcineurin will cause the activation of nuclear factor activated T cell. So this is the nuclear factor activated T cell. Nuclear factor of activated T cell. So phospholipase C is activated. It causes calcineurin activation. By binding of calcium with the calcineurin, it will activate the calcineurin, and this calcineurin will activate the nuclear factor of activated T cell, and the nuclear factor of activated T cell will travel to the nucleus, and it will cause the upregulation of the cytokine genes, and it will produce interleukin 2. So how is this cyclosporin inhibitors, calcineurin inhibitors causes immunosuppression? So the cyclophilin, so cyclosporin binds with the cyclophilin, inhibit the calcineurin, and the tacrolimus binds with the FK binding protein will inhibit the calcium-calcineurin complex. Calcium-calcineurin complex. So thereby it is preventing the activation of nuclear factor of activated T cell. This activation will not take place once this tacrolimus and cyclosporin binds to calcineurin calcium complex. So immune system will not get activated. Now the anti-proliferative agents, azathioprine and mycophenolate. Lymphocytes are among the most rapidly proliferative cells in the body. Lymphocyte proliferation and clonal expansions are an integral part of the immune response to an allograft. Azathioprine is converted into the liver to its active metabolite 6-mercaptopurine, which blocks purine metabolism and thereby inhibits the cellular proliferation. Mycophenolic acid and mycophenolate mofetil and mycophenolic acid sodium, after ingestion, is converted to its active metabolite MBA, mycophenolic acid. It inhibits the enzyme inosine monophosphate dehydrogenase, which is a rate-limiting enzyme in the de novo pathway of purine nucleotide synthesis. As lymphocytes do not have a salvage pathway for purine synthesis, their ability to proliferate is selectively impaired. So anti-proliferative agents will inhibit the proliferation of the T lymphocytes, thereby inhibiting the activation of immune system. So that is the role of anti-proliferative agent. Then mammalian target of rapamycin inhibitors like sirolimus and everolimus. It is again binds with the FK binding protein. So they act by inhibiting the intracellular kinase called mammalian target of rapamycin. It then interfere with the intracellular signaling from the interleukin 2 receptor, arresting T cell division in the G1 phase. So this mTOR is mammalian target of rapamycin is needed for the proliferation, cell division and proliferation. So once it has been inhibited, so it will arrest the T cell division in the G1 phase. So that is the action of mammalian target of rapamycin inhibitors. They are sirolimus and everolimus. Okay, so this is the same thing. Then T cell co-stimulatory blockage. So in the initial video, I told regarding the CTLA4. So T cell co-stimulatory blocker. So what is happening? So CTLA4 immunoglobulin is a fusion protein comprising extracellular domain of CTLA4 fused to human immunoglobulin Fc. It binds to the co-stimulatory ligand CD80 and CD86 expressed on the antigen presenting cells, and as a result prevents them from delivering the co-stimulatory signal to the T cells that are required to full T cell activation. So we know that activation of the T cell requires the co-stimulatory molecules also. So only when the CD80 and CD86 binds to the CD28, then only the T cell will become activated. So if we can block the CD80 and CD86 present on the antigen presenting cells, we can prevent the activation of T cells. So this is taking place by CTLA4 immunoglobulin. So CTLA4 will bind to the CD80 and 86 and will cause inactivation of the T cells and inactivation of the do not activate the immune system. Then antibody therapies, monoclonal antibodies directed against the interleukin 2 receptors on the T lymphocytes. It can also used to temporarily augment the effect of calcineurin blockade during the early post-transplant period. Their effect lasts for a few weeks only, and they lack in significant agent-specific side effect. They do not have any side effect. It is mainly used to temporarily augment the effect of calcineurin blocks. Sorry. Then polyclonal antibody and monoclonal antibody preparations like alemtuzumab, anti-CD52, expressed on the T cells and dendritic cells, are also quite widely used as more potent and alternative induction agent. Then the monoclonal anti-CD20 antibody cetuximab depletes B lymphocytes and is widely used as a component of protocols to enable ABO and HLA antibody incompatible renal transplantation. So these are newer drugs. We just note down these things. So we'll see the agent-specific side effects of immunosuppressive agents used in organ transplantation. So all immunosuppressive agents increases the risk of infection. So we will see what are the side effects of each of these. Then corticosteroids can cause hypertension, dyslipidemia, diabetes, osteoporosis, vascular necrosis, and Cushingoid appearance. Then azathioprine causes leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, hepatotoxicity, gastrointestinal symptoms. Then mycophenolic acid derivatives causes leukopenia, thrombocytopenia, and gastrointestinal symptoms. Then cyclosporine causes nephrotoxicity, hypertension, dyslipidemia, hirsutism, gingival hyperplasia. Then tacrolimus can cause nephrotoxicity, hypertension, dyslipidemia, neurotoxicity, and diabetes. Then mTOR inhibitors causes thrombocytopenia, dyslipidemia, pneumonitis, and impaired wound healing. Then the other newer drugs, there are no much reactions are there. There are autoantibodies can cause infusion reactions and autoimmune diseases. Then and again it can cause infusion reactions and pulmonary toxicity. So we will see how we will give this immunosuppressive therapy. That is immunosuppressive regimes. So immunosuppressive therapy started at the time of transplantation and is continued indefinitely. So requirement of immunosuppression is highest in the first few weeks after transplantation when the risk of acute rejection is greatest. We know that the only rejection we can prevent is acute rejection. So it is the role of immunosuppression is highest is in the first few weeks after transplantation. So cyclosporin and tacrolimus are the main agent, and this is often supplemented with anti-CD25 monoclonal antibody induction therapy. So calcineurin inhibitors are usually combined with an anti-proliferative agent, mostly MMF and steroids, so-called triple therapy. Less often as CNI is used. When there is a particular concern about the acute rejection, polyclonal or monoclonal antibody preparations are administered, followed by a calcineurin inhibitor, and anti-proliferative agent and steroids. Now we will see the infection that can occur in following a immunosuppressive therapy. One is a bacterial infection. Bacterial infections in the wound, respiratory tract, and urinary tract are the important problems in the case of a immunosuppressive therapy. It is standard practice to give a broad spectrum antibiotic to cover the perioperative period as prophylaxis against wound infection and possible bacterial contamination of the donor organ. Then viral infection can also occur. The risk of viral infection is highest during the first 6 months after transplantation, and the most common problem is the cytomegalovirus infection. Without prophylaxis, a CME disease is typically present at 4 to 8 weeks with a high swinging fever, lethargy, and leukopenia. Other presenting complaints are pneumonia, gastrointestinal disease, hepatitis, retinitis, and encephalitis. So all are the problems caused by cytomegalovirus. A severe cytomegalovirus disease is potentially fatal. Prophylaxis for cytomegalovirus consists of administration of antiviral agents, most commonly valganciclovir, acyclovir, and valacyclovir. A diagnosis of active CME infection is confirmed by PCR to detect the viral DNA in the whole blood and by histological examination of biopsy material. Treatment is with antiviral agents like valganciclovir and intravenous ganciclovir. Then another viral infection is the herpes simplex viral infection, which is common after transplantation and is usually due to reactivation of a latent infection. It causes mucocutaneous lesions around the mouth and sometimes genitalia. This usually responds to topical treatment with acyclovir, but in severe cases, systemic antiviral therapy is required. The BK virus is emerging as an important cause of graft dysfunction after renal transplantation. Infection with BK virus is almost universal during the childhood with latent infection in the epithelium of the urinary tract. So BK virus usually causes infection in the childhood. Immunosuppression causes lytic BK virus replication with the graft involvement in 1 to 5% of the renal transplantation. The only effective treatment to reduce the level of immunosuppression to allow natural immune mechanism to regain control of the virus. Okay, so we have to reduce some of the immunosuppression to prevent the viral infections, to regain the natural immunosuppressive immune mechanism to regain the control over the virus. Then again, another major problem in immunosuppression is the malignancy. The increased risk of malignancy is particularly high for skin cancer and post-transplant lymphoproliferative diseases. Most of the skin cancers are seen are squamous cell carcinoma, but basal cell carcinoma and malignant melanoma are also common than the general population. 50% of the transplant recipients will develop a skin malignancy within 20 years of transplantation. Then post-transplant lymphoproliferative disease. It's an abnormal proliferation of the B lymphocytes, usually in response to Epstein-Barr virus infection. The condition presents in a variety of ways, including as infectious mononucleosis type illness or lymphadenopathy, or with involvement of extranodal sites such as tonsils and gastrointestinal tract. Then PTLD occurs in around 1 to 3% of the kidneys and liver transplant recipients, and the incidence is considerably higher in children. Those patients at most risk are those who have received aggressive immunosuppression. PTLD is a serious condition with an overall mortality rate of up to 50%. Chemotherapy is often given, and antiviral therapy, surgery, and radiotherapy may also have a role in treating established disease. Disseminated PTLD and central nervous system involvement have a very poor prognosis. Transplant recipients also have a 300-fold increase in developing Kaposi sarcoma, although this malignancy is still very uncommon after transplantation. So mainly the transplant-related malignancies are skin malignancy and post-transplant lymphoproliferative disease, and rarely Kaposi sarcoma can also occur. Okay, so this is the nutshell or the major side effects of the non-specific immunosuppression, which we already covered everything. I think this is a long topic. Please try to go through the slides and take only what is required for you and prepare. Thank you all.